Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. It's Tuesday, December the 5th. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen. Our first guest is Saul Arbus, and we're going to be talking about something that I think is a wonderful idea, the Department of Peace. And we're going to find out what a Department of Peace would do. There's a bill going before Canada's Parliament very, very soon. And Saul, why don't you tell us about the bill?
Well, thank you first of all for having me on the show. I'm doing a follow-up to the previous talk that we did, and I have some very important developments to tell you about. We've been at this since about 2006.
10 years, 11 years.
And we have had, so we work on three levels. The idea, of course, we've got to build the mass movement. And the second thing is that we're working, of course, with parliamentarians and all political parties, because in our view, peace building is nonpartisan. And thirdly, we work internationally through a group called the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures for Peace, which has about 55 member countries. These are representatives. They're from civil society, not official. But there are some official government representatives from the countries that already have departments of peace. And the first one actually was the very small Pacific Island nation of the Solomon Islands. They have a minister of peace after they had a civil conflict. Mostly these things emerge after there's been civil war and major domestic conflict. So that was the first one. And then following that, in 2009, the Costa Rica, which has been an innovator in the whole field of peace building since 1948, when it abolished its army. It declared a minister of peace, and actually our people, that is with the Global Alliance that I just mentioned, in Costa Rica, were extremely instrumental in that development in Costa Rica. It turned out that Oscar Arias was then the president, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in ending the civil conflicts in El Salvador and Nicaragua. And his brother was the head of this foundation to which our people were party. So we had a conduit, and that was very successful. And the third important one is Nepal. At the great insistence, really, of the Maoists, as the Communist Party was called there, they have formed a Ministry of Peace and Reconciliation. And finally, I will mention, in Papua New Guinea is a very large territory, and within it there are autonomous provinces. And the province of Bougainville, headed by a former guerrilla fighter who lost his leg in conflict, they also have a minister of peace within the regional government. So now it's Canada's turn, and it's about time. We've always been the best positioned country for this, from this point of view, but we haven't acted on it. And so this very month, before Parliament rises, we're expecting the third variation of this bill to be presented to Parliament. It's a private member's bill, but the main difference now is this bill is being introduced by a prominent Liberal member. Before it was always the opposition parties, and we hope that they come on. So the way it works with a private member's legislation is you have a mover and a seconder, and then up to 20 people can co-sign that bill. Okay? So this new bill will come forward possibly by December the 15th, or certainly because when Parliament rises, or certainly in the spring of next year. And we're extremely excited by that. We feel that this has a real chance of passing. Also, on second reading of a bill, it has happened, and this is a long shot. The bill can be assumed by the government and become a government bill. Because right now, I know there's, he's working very closely with several ministries in order to be able to bring this forward with some kind of agreement from the others. So that kind of brings you up to date with where we are. So let me go back now and talk about the rationale for a Department of Peace. Well, we've already talked a bit about this, Jack. We live in incredibly precarious times. We have an unstable president who is about to see the beginnings of impeachment proceedings, not a moment too soon. He has casually talked about the use of nuclear weapons. And if we have them, his famous phrase was, if we have them, why don't we use them? Okay? Now, you may also know that recently...
Can I just say one thing
yes,
in response to
of
that?
course.
I'd just like to point out that the American military has been using nuclear weapons for decades, the depleted uranium that they've used all over the Middle East. So, yeah, what Trump said sounds crazy, but the lunatics who run the U.S. have already, it's not, they're doing it. He's at least just talking about it.
It's absolutely true that you could say that depleted uranium used to harden weapons shells is very much becomes a nuclear conflict, and I agree with you. But now I'm talking about much greater conflagrations in what is happening between North Korea and the United States now. Now, you look at the situation with North Korea. This is their alternate deterrent, in effect. Every other country in the Middle East has been invaded by the United States or by NATO and so forth. A country like Libya, for example, which gave up its nuclear weapons. Now, I'm not speaking in favor of nuclear weapons. I'm speaking in terms of understanding where North Korea is. And the response by the United States is upping the ante enormously. So there really are, as you know, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists with their doomsday clock. It's now 2.5 minutes to midnight. They've moved the clock. They've moved the dials. So, here is an opportunity, we would think, for a country like Canada. If we had a Department of Peace, if we had a Minister of Peace, would not be supporting the United States in this situation, but as a country which should have an independent policy on foreign policy, and particularly on nuclear weapons, to be at the forefront of trying to establish negotiations between the parties. And assurances, which is, interestingly enough, all that North Korea, I might be simplifying this a little bit, but all that North Korea over the years, not more recently, when they've hardened, all they wanted was a treaty which would guarantee their security from the United States. They wanted recognition from the United States. As you know, there is no diplomatic mission there. They work through Scandinavian countries or other countries that do. So we're in a situation where there is no negotiation. There's no talk about negotiation. Meanwhile, we have in July an extraordinary breakthrough where we have signed. 122 countries were present. 50 have already formally ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. 122 countries were there. Canada was not there.
Yeah,
Canada was not there. You know why?
There was no coverage in the media that Canada has refused to sign this bill. What's it called again?
It's called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons.
Yeah, Trudeau didn't sign it, and there was not a word, even that it was happening. The people of Canada were just kept in the dark. It
gets worse, Bob. It gets worse. Not only did we were not present at either of the two negotiating sessions. We actually boycotted, along with all the other native countries, with the exception of Holland.
All the NATO countries.
All the NATO countries. And during this period of time, when Canada was considering its position, Donald Trump sent out a letter to all of the NATO members urging them to not participate because this would compromise, as you know, NATO has a first strike nuclear policy. That is the policy. And
they have a first strike nuclear.
Yes.
What does that mean?
First strike means that we are willing to preemptively strike in a situation where we feel nuclear weapons by others may be used. Okay? So we're not responding. We are taking the aggressive lead in this matter. And so Canada meekly and ashamedly went along with Donald and did not participate in these things. So now we have an enormous campaign which I want to tell you about. Arising from this, and given the fact that the nuclear disarmament movement has, thanks to Donald, has created enormous new momentum, which is a great thing to see.
I haven't even heard about it.
I know, but you're going to. We have the Vancouver Island Network for Peace and Disarmament, which actually is a remarkable group of people, which has on it people that won the Order of Canada, which is Mary Wynne Ashford, is quite famous for her work here. We have many people that are working with us, including young people, and the university has been supportive in terms of venues and so forth. And what we have done in the face of Canada boycotting and not signing this treaty is we have created the citizen signing ceremonies. Everywhere we go and have meetings, we bring usually large format sheets, which has the preamble of the bill, and people can sign on as citizen signing. And we're taking these signatures to Ottawa, and we're pursuing this very, very actively.
So Saul, why do you think the media is not covering this issue? I mean, here's a group doing good work, and I, as somebody who's interested, have never heard of any of this, literally, including the Department of Peace.
Well, I have to say that Times Colonist has done some opinion pieces on this recently, a couple of them, in the last few months. But generally speaking, the media, I mean, I hate to use that phrase again, what is it? If it bleeds, it leads, isn't that the phrase in
Well, that's
media?
very true.
Yeah.
That's not because
So
people necessarily want that, but that's their rule.
That's what they get.
That's what people get. That's what people are given.
So, there is a very small but emergent field, what we call peace journalism, where journalists are trained to see, other elements than war and conflict in a given situation, and also the opportunities for peace and for a peaceful outcome, for negotiated outcomes of conflict, rather than simply always ramping up the actual conflict itself. The more aggravated the assaults, the more coverage, and this is very important. So, as I say, we have been revivified, happily, and this has also affected the Department of Peace initiative, because one of the things we're talking about is we do have an ambassador for disarmament, and
we being the government.
Canada has an ambassador for disarmament, and there has not been a successful meeting of the Conference on Disarmament for over a decade. They haven't been able to agree on an agenda. That's why this treaty at the General Assembly of the UN, which was an end run around that group, produced this very good outcome. But we feel that a Minister of Peace should be the lead minister in both moving towards disarmament, but also the implementation of any treaties that come out of it when Canada ultimately does sign it.
Saul, I agree 100%. We're out of time. What could be more important, really, in these crazy times than a Department of Peace? So I don't know what we can all do, but we can certainly notice that it's an issue, and I wish it would become a more central issue in the country. Thank you very much, Saul.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you.
And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. It's Tuesday, December the 5th. We're going to be talking about Site C. Our guest is Galen Armstrong. He is the Peace Valley campaigner with the Sierra Club of British Columbia. So welcome, Galen.
Thank you.
And what do you want to talk about?
Well, I want to talk about why Site C, if it was built, would be a complete and total disaster. We've been fighting it for years, as have many people. It seems that we're getting close to the point where the provincial government is finally going to make a decision. We're told it could happen this week, and I feel that they're going to do the right thing and stop the dam. I mean, the first big thing is that it violates Treaty 8. So Treaty 8 First Nations have the right to hunt and fish and exist in their territory, to use their territory for cultural purposes, as they have for time immemorial, and flooding 83 kilometers of the Peace River completely takes that right away from them. So that hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been addressed by the provincial government, the federal government, or the courts. It's a big, outstanding problem to violate a treaty. We have governments who have committed to upholding the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and this is like, here's their big chance. Here's their big opportunity to say, no, we can't flood the Peace River Valley. We can't hold water back from Wood Buffalo National Park, the Peace Athabasca Delta downstream, because it's too much of an impact. So that's where I would start. A mega dam of any kind, a big earth-fill dam blocking up a river, is always going to have a ton of impacts. So this is a dam it had more significant environmental impacts found from the joint review panel, the environmental assessment, more impacts than any other project ever assessed in Canada.
Yeah, just say that again, because when I heard that a while back, it just absolutely shocked me. So this project has more
significant environmental effects, and so more impacts. So when there's a big...
We're assuming most of them are negative, because none of them are going to be positive.
Absolutely. We're talking about negative impacts.
Than any other project in Canadian history that they've looked
ever
at.
assessed by the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency.
You know, what surprised me when I heard that was that I hadn't heard it before, because it's kind of a shocking thing. You'd think that in all the coverage given to Site C, the fact that it has more negative environmental impacts than any other project ever assessed in Canadian history would be up there somewhere, but I had never heard about it, and I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard about it until just now.
There are a lot of problems with Site C that you would think you would have heard about. And for one thing, there are just so many problems that it's kind of hard to keep track of them all. We've had a lot of discussion about rates and about finances, and rightly so, because this is a project that originally it was going to be, I think, $6.5 billion. The price tag grew to $8 billion, and then $10 billion. So now it could go over $12.5 billion, according to...
if we're lucky, it won't go too much over that. And then we've got to pay the interest on it.
And then
right? So we're looking at $25 billion.
We don't know what the final price tag is going to be, and so that's a huge, huge problem for all British Columbians. We all have to pay for that through our hydro bills. If we continue this dam, the rates are going to go up. Young people, you know, my generation, my kids, my grandkids, they all have to pay for it. That's been a big part of the focus, and it makes sense because it's a huge, huge problem. But I think all the focus on that has buried the other big problems, like more impacts than any other project. So Northern Gateway Pipeline, far more impacts than that.
This project is often in our local media, especially the Times Colonist, presented as clean energy. Meaning that it's clean in terms of climate change and greenhouse gases. Could you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not clean, it's not green, and it's a problem in terms of climate change. There's a study last year that showed that indeed, as we've known for a long time, giant reservoirs are a large, significant emitter of methane. Methane, one of the most dangerous greenhouse gases. So if we're flooding 83 kilometers of the Peace, plus a few kilometers of tributary rivers flowing into it, we're creating this huge reservoir, and it emits methane. It contributes to the greenhouse gas problem.
And I've read a couple of times from very good sources that it is believed that the amount of greenhouse gases coming from a reservoir are the same as if you were burning coal or oil to produce the same amount of electricity over a period of time. In other words, Site C is like a fossil fuel powered electrical generating plant, but we're being told over and over and again that it's clean.
Yeah, it's very frustrating too. You know, when we hear it called a clean green project, it's anything but that. On top of that, there's no use for the power. We don't need the power. We have a surplus of electricity in British Columbia, including electricity that's ready and dispatchable at any time. The reason for building the dam, I think, is unclear to a lot of people. In fact, it's a little bit unclear to me. Originally, you know, decades ago, it was going to be used to sell to California. California decided they don't consider mega dams to be green energy, rightly so. So then it was going to be sold to LNG plants. There is no LNG industry. So it's been a project in search of a buyer, and they haven't found one. So we're going to build this, you know, $12.5 billion plus dollar dam, and then we have nowhere to sell the power.
And yet, what are the odds makers saying about what's going to happen sometime in the next week or so?
Well, it's you know, everyone's making guesses. I saw yesterday that Keith Baldry tweeted that he now thinks that the dam won't be completed. He thinks the provincial cabinet is going to decide to do the right thing and cancel the dam. You know, I think that the government has so many reasons to cancel this dam. I've talked about treaty rights, environmental damage. I can talk a bit about the downstream impacts, because we talked a lot about the impacts right in the Peace River Valley. But downstream, there are impacts as well. So the Peace River starts in the Rockies. It flows northeast into Alberta, and into the Peace Athabasca Delta. So the Peace Athabasca Delta is largely protected by Wood Buffalo National Park. It's Canada's biggest national park. It's a World Heritage Site. And this is land that's been used by the Mikisew Cree and is home to the Mikisew Cree, who are fighting the dam as well. So if you flood the Peace River Valley, it lessens the flow downstream. So the Peace Athabasca Delta, all of a sudden, it doesn't have the flow it depends on to protect these ecosystems, migratory birds, fish, amphibians, the entire huge ecosystem. There's a reason our biggest national park is there. It's an incredibly biodiverse area and ecosystem. So we're damaging that ecosystem downstream as well. UNESCO has called on Canada to do an assessment of Site C specifically for those downstream impacts. There's no indication that assessment will happen. We're hoping it will. But the impacts are so great and so many and so very, very negative that I think the provincial government will do the right thing and stop it.
Personally, I think there should be a criminal investigation of how it ever got started. I heard an American expert on the radio a few weeks ago, Robert McCullough, saying that basically BC Hydro used, for their cost numbers, a different formula than is used by any other utility in North America, I think he said, or the world. So they put in all the numbers, and this is going back to the very beginning of this. They put in all the numbers, and it came out with Site C being cheaper than wind. But McCullough said if you use the formulas used by everybody else, then the same numbers going in, will make wind cheaper than Site C. So we were manipulated from the very beginning on this, and yet here we are, billions of dollars later, huge amounts of damage already done. And I mean, does the Sierra Club have any position on this? I mean,
Well, it's a really, really good question. How do we get here? How do we get to this place? How was it approved without the Utilities Commission having a chance to look at it before the construction started, before it was built? I mean, I still, you know, remind everyone that we have spent maybe around $2 billion, but it's just nothing compared to the $12.5 billion or more that would be spent. And these cost overruns are because the geotechnical problems that exist. So that's another reason to do an investigation. So why was a dam approved in a place that is known for landslides, that is very unstable soils, rich soils for agriculture, by the way. It's part of the problem for flooding the Peace is the agricultural issue.
Now, right now, one of the reasons this thing may get stopped is because of the cracks that have appeared in different places. I don't know anything about it except I've heard something.
The tension cracks, yeah, absolutely. So there have been at least 2 major tension cracks. The first one is a 400-meter tension crack. So the ground is cracking. And on top of that, other landslides. Work has had to stop several times to try to manage and deal with these cracks. But that's the thing, that this is an area that's prone to these types of cracks and landslides. It's really, really hard to build a dam there. I mean, I've talked to people who live up there and who have been watching this happen, and they've seen the problems again and again. And so it's a serious question. How was a dam approved to be built in such an unstable area?
Maybe you can just talk for a minute about the value of the land that will be flooded in terms of food production and just the land itself.
Absolutely. The land is extremely rich. It's extremely valuable for agriculture and food production. It was the largest ever exemption from the ALR.
I mean, they pulled it out in order to do Site C.
They pulled it out in order to create the flood reserve so they could do Site C. So, I mean, the hope is that we can cancel this dam, we can remediate the site, we can return that land to the ALR. Food security is a huge issue in this world, including in the province. We get most of our food from California. I don't think we can always depend on that.
Can I say something about California?
Yeah.
They're using fracking wastewater now to irrigate their crops, and you've heard of that.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. So yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have some place we could depend on where, of course, we're doing the fracking ourselves, but we can hope for something better.
We need it. At the very least, we need places where we can grow food. It's one of the most productive places in the entire province for growing food, even though it's up in in northern BC. It's an incredible, special place. I do think the government will do the right thing and cancel the dam.
What if they don't?
If they don't, we'll continue to fight. The federal government also has an obligation to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's the federal government that's been called on by UNESCO to do an assessment.
It's funny that Mr. Trudeau was apologizing for past crimes of the federal government while committing the current crimes today. Galen, we're out of time. I'm sorry. Do you want to just finish off with one point, or?
Yeah, it is a funny and odd thing. I mean, it's not even funny. It's actually really, really sad and heartbreaking. And this is a great opportunity for both of these governments to take reconciliation seriously.
Well, by the time you're watching this, the answer will very likely be known, and if not, within a day or so. So we'll see what happens. I certainly hope they do what I think the people of British Columbia want, which is to stop this crazy project. Thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back to the Citizens Forum. Today I have with me Mehdi Najari. Mehdi is our resident expert on environmental issues, particularly Mehdi is focused on the issues around the Site C dam, and as Jack pointed out, maybe this decision will be made already by the time you see this, but nevertheless, we're just going to give you all the reasons why Site C dam is such a terrible idea. So welcome to the show, Mehdi.
Thank you, Walter. I'm no expert. I have just background in science,
okay.
And I can read.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry I called you an expert, because I myself hesitate to use that term.
It's I was reading about what's happened in other areas, and it's important to learn from what's happened, for example, in Newfoundland.
Okay.
Muskrat Falls Dam. It was first was approved for $6.2 billion dam,
yeah.
And now is not finished yet, and is over $12.7 billion they spent, and is a boondoggle. It's going to bankrupt the province of Newfoundland because the number of the citizen is very small,
yes.
And it's going to divide it to, everybody has to pay,
yeah.
And the rate of utility rate is going to double,
yeah.
And there is Dr. David Wardy, which is, yeah, an economist and also a high senior official of the Newfoundland, former senior official of Newfoundland government. He wrote to BC and say, don't do it. Learn from our mistake. And this is what David Wardy said. BC has the luxury of being able to stop this now without going any further. In terms of takeaway from Muskrat Falls, it is not too late to stop it. So they are too late to stop.
Yeah.
They are telling us, don't do it. This type of project is going to come always.
Yeah.
Cost overrun, and it doesn't worth it. It's expensive energy. You know, this is the time that right now, for example, there was a contract according to CBC Don Pett article, there was a contract in Mexico for kilowatt hours of energy, 1.5 cents for kilowatt hours of energy. We have in Australia, Mr. Musk of
That's
Tesla
right.
company build a storage battery in 100 days. The biggest storage battery in the world that can store more than what Site C produce in a storage.
Yeah.
The game is changed totally, and this Site C dam, if it's continue, it's going to cost us not 6 or 7 or 8 or now, according to BCUC, in excess of $10 billion. But even that is not high. They say in excess. But how much up it's going to go, it depends on the cost overrun. Already we have cost overrun,
Yeah.
And the project is behind for 1 year, and there is a cost overrun. I'm going to talk about who is building it, then we know what's going to happen with those type of characters that are having contract with.
Yeah, I think this is something we should really get into, because I had just mentioned, when I see pictures of Site C Dam, I see a bunch of bulldozers pushing earth around. It's an earthen dam. I know there's a lot more to it, but the budget's something like $60 million a day or something.
One last thing about David Wardy, I should say, is that he said the sunken cost. The sunken cost is the cost that already happened.
Yeah.
For example, in Site C Dam is about 2.2 billion, and maybe another 1.8 billion to remediate the land. That is called sunken cost. But David Wardy said, forget about that, because that is not as important as the amount of money you are going to use to finally finish the dam.
Yeah.
And that is the cost that is going to go wild and overrun, and it's not going to be 10 billion, 12 billion. I promise, if these things continue, is going to be way over $15 billion.
Yeah.
Why? Because there is a geological problem. We have the tension cracks that BC Hydro tried to hide it from the people. It's happened in February, and they don't know how much it's going to cost to fix that problem. Maybe it's unfixable, and they are building on a place that is going to have slums, slides, and tension cracks.
Yeah.
And imagine you build a dam where it's going to, a slide is happening all the time. That dam is not the same thing that happened in Mount Pauli, because on underlying geological problem, it's going to happen there.
Isn't that interesting that it all comes around to, you look at the Imperial Mines disaster, which is the largest mining disaster in the history of Canada, if not in the world. And it was all around the fact that they allowed a dam to be built where it shouldn't have been. And here we go, we're at Site C Dam. We're looking at these earthen structures starting to slump and move, and you're wondering, is this the same engineers that did the one at Imperial
Guess
Mines?
who designed this dam? According to New York Times December 2016 article, I read, among the companies hired to review and design the project were the accounting firm KPMG, which has donated more than $330,000 to Mr. Bennett, British Columbia Liberal Party, and SNC Lavalin, a Canadian engineering firm that has been imbued in corruption and bribery scandal and face sanction by the World Bank.
So there you
The
go.
most scandalous engineering company, is SN Lavalin in the world. And those are the ones that were engaged in design of this. Who is building it?
Yeah.
A so-called Peace River hydropower partnership. Who are the three companies? The Petro-West Group, which is a Canadian, Acciona Infrastructure Canada, which is a Spanish company, and Samsung.
Okay.
Petro-West already in August went bankrupt. First.
So how could they go bankrupt, Mehdi?
Because of their good management and doing a very good job. Second, Acciona is engaged in allegation, according to Dermot Travers' article, allegation of misappropriation of public funds, falsifying document, and money laundering. Samsung CT, accused of rigging bets, and finds hundreds of millions of dollars, fined $6.2 million for collusion in 2009. Last year was banned from bidding on any public work project in South Korea, corruption scandal in Brazil. So this is the companies that are building. Already the consortium claiming additional costs from BC Hydro because of the delay and problems that the site has.
Now, who checks their invoicing? Who checks how far they really got?
The same BC Hydro that lied to us again and again and again and again. Let me talk about BC Hydro lies. On August 30th, BC Hydro wrote a more than 860 pages report to BCUC. In that report, they said that Site C project was on time and on budget. That's August 30th. In interim report that BCUC wrote in September 20, they said the same thing, is on site and on budget. By October 5th,
a couple of months later.
No, it's 5 weeks later from August 30th.
Okay.
It came out that it's not on budget and it's not on time because of the tension cracks and other problems. They knew since February that is not on budget, but they were lying to BCUC on August 30th. By November 1st, when the BCUC wrote their last report, the final report, the BCUC claimed that the project is neither on budget nor on time. This is the BC Hydro. BC Hydro projection for future electricity demand, the information they gave to BCUC was rejected by BCUC as not accurate. BC Hydro interest rate for borrowing money that they told UCBC rejected that and say that is not true. BCUC export prices, BC Hydro export prices of energy. So if they build it, they say we can sell it, and that export prices are not accurate. They are over. Let me tell you this, even if they build this, by 2024, for more than 10 years, we are gonna sell the electricity that produced below the cost. It's gonna cost every year after the production started between 250 million to 400 million cost us to produce energy from Site C. That means in 10-year period, $2.5 billion to $4 billion loss.
Now, how could that ever be construed as a good idea, like an economic model? How can that?
Only a corrupt government that is want to create a bottomless pit of public money go to the hands of these contractors and these businesses can do that. And that's what they have done. So BC NDP is going to make this decision. This is December 5th. So we don't know what their decision is, but it should be obvious. Because if BC NDP make the decision to continue this, NDP is finished. Yeah. And they will not have any credibility on environmental front. They will have no credibility on respecting the Aboriginal rights and treaty obligation. They have no credibility on upholding the public interest because they are supporting the corporate interest, not public interest, because of all the cost overrun. There is going to be exuberant increase in the rate of the electricity. Who is going to pay? Where is BC Nurses Union or Teachers Union or BC GEU members are going to pay more for having 2,000 workers? And let me finish with that, telling about the workers there.
Okay.
Everybody talk about the workers.
It's all unionized, isn't it?
This is a yellow dog union that is working there. This is BC Contractors and Business Association, which is a vociferous opposition to NDP in last 25 years by their spokesperson, Phil Rockstein. You know, it was the forefront of opposition to NDP. And the union that is working there is the Christian Labor Association of Canada, which is a yellow dog union, is a union there to reduce, you know, and undercut the payments to the workers and protection of the workers and their job site and so on and so forth. So they are there to reduce the wages of the workers.
Yeah.
These are the people that are. Even with that, we should protect. We love to have protect the workers. They are going to have the jobs of doing the remediation. Let me tell you this, they talk about all the time about the workers. 15,000 workers from Sears is being laid off this Christmas. Nobody talk about that. Nobody say to Sears, oh, you shouldn't stop the workers of, during the Christmas time. These workers, if the Site C stop, if NDP stops Site C, they're not going to lose their jobs. They're going to be jobs for them to do the remediation of the place. So all this nonsense about jobs and this and that is nonsense. This is the Karen Bacher. I should say to the people that Karen Bacher, Professor Karen Bacher of UBC, have done a tremendous public service with series of reports about why Site C should not go. This is the number of jobs the Site C create over time.
Okay, that's the green?
The green line.
Okay.
The blue line is the alternative, BCUC alternative number of jobs that is created. You can see the number of jobs is tremendously much more with the alternative to Site C.
Yeah.
If we want jobs in future, let's go with the alternative. We can reduce the cost to the people of this province, at the same time have a very solid record of jobs for future for the people of this province.
Well, Mehdi, I mean, you made such a strong case here. I mean, I hope somebody in the NDP is going to watch this program. And what's always troubled me, and we'll just wrap up on this, is why have the NDP waited so long to make this decision? I mean, it surprises me that they as the estimates are that $60 million a day is being spent as we speak. The $60 million a day or a month?
60 million a month.
A month. I don't want to make it too big, but if you look at that over 6 months, that's 360 million.
There are some NDP insiders that are pushing for Site C. One of them is the spokesperson of the Allied Hydro Council of BC, Mr. Jim Quayle. Here is what he said. It is simply not correct. He's attacking the BCUC and the critics. It is simply not correct. That's not a realistic projection of any means. That means, the criticism of BC hydro numbers.
Yeah.
Let's get that off the table. Let's get the facts off the table, and here is what he's suggesting. If there is a debate, it should be about political issues, where people can have their point of view. That means your baseless point of view versus my baseless point of view. Let's fight on that.
Neither of us have any power.
Yeah, let's put the facts out.
Yeah.
Robert McAuliffe, the energy expert from Oregon, he said something very interesting to BCUC. He said, it reminds those people that are pushing to continuation of Site C, it reminds them of the songs by Pete Seeger, waist deep in Big Muddy. And one of the line is, we were neck deep in the Big Muddy and the big fool said to push on. And that's what they are going to do. The captain were pushing the soldiers to go to the Big Muddy, and it was a quicksand, and captain were dead, and he was still saying, before he died, let's push on.
That is so sad. They want us to march on into our deaths here. And that seems to be all that you can say for this Site C project. It's very hard to find any values of anything that would be any benefit for BCers. It's always troubled me that the NDP has waited so long to make this decision. If they decide to go ahead with Site C, politics will never be the same in British Columbia from that moment on. So I hope they see the wisdom in turning down this proposal, and then we can get on to other environmental issues and other social issues that we have to deal with. So thank you so much, Mehdi, for coming in. And that wraps up this segment of Citizens Forum. Who wants the Site C dam? With no demand globally for more electrical power and no real discussion of energy alternatives, the corporate media gives little time for criticism and uses questionable polling results in the support of the dam. So, Jack, welcome to the show, and welcome to this segment of the show. And I'm going to ask you that. Who wants this dam?
Well, if I would say the banksters, the big international construction companies who are getting a lot of money from this, the people who want to bankrupt BC Hydro and then later take it over and own it, the people who are going to make a lot of money from this, including on the debt that we're going to have to be paying for many years, and the media, because what Mehdi said in the last segment, if the media had told us that in big block letters like they tell us so many other things, this never would have gone ahead in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's so convoluted when you dig into all the reasons that they're giving. Now, you'd sent me an email this morning wondering, well, who exactly wants this down? Because
right, I heard Andrew Weaver on the radio say it was 40% supported it, 30% opposed it, and 30% were sort of no opinion.
Well, what I did is I went online and I looked at a couple of polls. Now, on October 2nd, 2017, Angus Reid surveyed 608 British Columbians about their thoughts on Site C and found that 45% say the dam should go ahead, 27% say it should be canceled, and 28% are not sure. Now, previously in another poll released on November 16th, 2016 by Insights West, 73% of BC residents supported halting construction and sending the project to independent review. They found that 63% of respondents who voted for the governing Liberal Party supported additional Site C review, while 83% of BC NDPers favored halting the dam altogether. These are two very different results. Angus Reid seems to be saying most people want the dam by a wide margin, and the Insights West poll says the majority of people do not want it. So who is telling the truth? Now, you might want to look at the Angus Reid's record. 1 week before the 2013 BC election, Angus Reid claimed that the NDP's support had dropped from a high of 17% over the Liberals to 9% lead. And that can be seen on this website. And if we are to believe Angus Reid and the NDP, apparently the NDP apparently dropped a further 16% points in their support in the last week of the campaign, and they lost by 7% to the Liberals. This was the swiftest and largest drop of voter support in any modern election. Astonishingly, Angus Reid had very few explanations of the cause, and strangely, the NDP brass said very little about the situation. The only logical answer is Angus Reid appears to have been fiddling with the numbers, and they still seem to be bending the facts for people employing them right now. The best evidence that shows that a majority of people of BC do not want the Site C dam. This is the time for a decision. What is the Premier waiting for? So, Jack,
I would say that in terms of people wanting the dam, one of the biggest reasons is, of course, the jobs issue. But as Mehdi just showed, the people who are working there now are going to be working for a long time because the cost of remediation is almost the same as all the cost for what's been done so far. So, and then it shows like 5 times as many jobs from moving to renewable energy instead of Site C. So in terms of jobs, if people knew the truth, I think that would be another, bonk against Site C. But people don't know. We're given we're given incorrect information so much. You know, as I talked about with Galen from the Sierra Club, people are told over and over again that it's clean energy. It's not. It's greenhouse gas destructive in the worst sense.
Because of the methane gas.
Because of methane,
Because
yeah.
methane is like 35 times more potent than CO2.
Yeah. So when they look at dams, and this is just the fact, when they look at dams, they say they can be as bad for the energy created as burning fossil fuels to get the same amount of energy. That's what we're looking at. But we don't know anything about it because we're told something else.
And these dams eventually have to be decommissioned, and that's not factored into the costs at all. It's just like, you know, when you look at the economics, it's just...
Maybe the NDP could have stopped this the day they came
Yeah.
in, and we all would have been a lot better off.
That's what my biggest concern is. Why have they waited so long? You know, the economic arguments are what they are, but they're based upon something more fundamental, and that's the fundamental issues around human rights and social justice and environmental protection and being stewards of the land. The land will always remain productive well off into the future. And we're only enhancing the environment and not destroying it. Right now, the way we're spending our environmental capital, the way we're treating this is such short-term profit. No matter how you add this up, no matter whose pockets it's going into, it just simply does not work. And I would really love to see Andrew Weaver and John Horgan just say this is fundamentally and morally wrong. This is not a good idea. Our children's children are going to hate us for doing this. It just doesn't work. And based upon those values, say we're not going to support this.
And a criminal investigation into how this got started in the first place would not hurt. That's really, we've got to stop these people from doing this stuff to us. You know, it just happens over and over. The Blue Bridge here in town is a similar thing. You know, it's only $100 million, but that's only for the poor people of the city of Victoria. You know, $100 million just down the drain, and the $1 billion on sewage treatment for zero environmental benefit. It's like they're trying to bankrupt us, which they're doing. I heard some very good news from France.
Okay.
I'm not even sure it's true, but because I haven't checked it out, but they said that by 2020, France will ban completely the use of throwaway plates, throwaway cups, and throwaway cutlery.
Yeah.
All that mountain of garbage that's created by the McDonald's and the Tim Hortons and the fast food courts everywhere and all that stuff. I mean, imagine how great that would be if we just stopped doing that and just they have to wash dishes like everybody else.
Yeah, you know, when I was traveling in some places in Portugal and stuff, you'd go into a little store and they'd sell you some eggs and you'd take them in your hands. They didn't have anything to put them in. People would bring their own little containers.
Yes, that makes so much sense.
And wonderful food, by the way. You'd go into all these little shops and you'd buy some meat and then some vegetables, and great care was taken about the handling of the food and great respect for it. And the people all had great interactions with one another. There was just a win situation all the way around. It's not like going into these huge barns that we go into and scrape groceries into the cart at 12 o'clock midnight because, you know, the kids just got in bed. But yeah, we just don't seem to be connected in that way, you know, and I think that would be a great thing for France if...
Yeah, so I think that's an issue here, that if somebody took it on, it has a chance of winning. I think a lot of people would support it. I mean, especially kids, because really the message is it's your future that's being tossed away out of these things every day.
Yeah.
You know, it's our fault, but it's your future.
So what else have you on your mind, Jack?
How about, I just want to mention proportional representation. We should always put in a good word for PR voting. To me, it's more democratic, and that is the reason we should go ahead with it. I think there's going to be a huge fight. I think the media is going to go after it. Obviously, the liberals are going after it because the people who run the world, our country, our province, don't want it because it is more democratic. They have all the power now. Why would they want to share it with us? So it's going to be a dogfight. It's vitally important that we win, because if we win, it will really change a lot of things for the better.
Yeah, you know, like Justin Trudeau, who has a false majority, made the decision to build the pipeline going into Vancouver, with the name of which is the Enbridge pipeline.
No, Kinder Morgan.
Kinder Morgan pipeline. So sorry. Now that decision couldn't have been made under a proportional representation system, and if you look at the Site C dam decision, would never get this far. They would have been turned down years ago under a proportional representation system. So it's so vitally important that we stay focused on this prize, keep our eyes on this prize, and make sure that we bring it about. All the citizens in British Columbia, we have to get together on this one. We have to, no matter what the roadblocks will be ahead of us and the stumbling blocks, that we're able to bring it to fruition. And then we'll have a different type of system here in British Columbia, and a much easier job for you and I'm sure.
Well, a much easier job for everybody. You know, all the people who want a better province will get it from proportional representation. We're out of time.
Okay then, thank you very much, Jack, and that completes our show for this week.